The stars were dying, not in the slow, indifferent way that nature intended, but in the violent collapse of suns strangled by the unseen tides of the warp. Ancient constellations, once familiar to navigators and saints alike, were snuffed out in silence, replaced by a blackness that seemed to stare back. Worlds that had endured for 10 millennia now hung in ruin, their skies choked with the ash of burned cathedrals and shattered spires. The Imperium wasn't falling in a single blow, but rotting, each fracture spreading from within, each heartbeat of the galaxy carrying with it the memory of what was lost. And in the eye of terror, something stirred. The vast, impossible storm of the Imperium shifted in its endless convulsions, like the breath of some colossal beast dreaming of conquest. Fragments of memory drifted there. Banners burning in the siege of terror, the death cry of the Warmaster Horus, the mourning silence that followed. Among those broken echoes walked one who had once knelt beside the Warmaster's throne, one who had watched the final duel between Horus and the Emperor, and knew the moment when hope had died. We speak now of Ezekiel Abaddon, the first captain of the Sons of Horus, the chosen hand of the Warmaster himself, had been absent in the final moments of Horus's defeat. He had returned not to victory or glory, but to ruin. A father dead, a legion broken, and the gods they had trusted revealed as liars and manipulators. The corpse of Horus lay cold aboard the flagship Vengeful Spirit, its armor shattered, its eyes empty of the fire that once commanded legions. Abaddon stood there motionless, gazing down at the stillness of the man he had once believed invincible. No tears came, only a quiet, cold certainty that everything they had bled for had been wasted. The galaxy would never know this moment. It would be recorded only in whispers among traitor kin, that the first captain did not rage, nor curse, nor kneel. He turned away, leaving the corpse of Horus to the carrion gods. The Chaos powers had promised ascension, immortality, victory beyond reckoning. And yet they had abandoned Horus the moment his use was spent. The revelation burned deep into Abaddon's soul. If the gods could betray their most perfect champion, what were the rest of them but playthings? But still, a hunger remained, not for vengeance against the Emperor. That war had already been lost. Not for the broken promises of the gods, but for something older, colder. The dream Horus had once spoken of in the quiet hours before war. A galaxy remade by strength, ruled by vision, freed from the rusting chains of the Imperium's dogma and the petty rivalries of the warp. If the gods could not deliver it, Abaddon would take it by his own hand. Before we begin this tale of betrayal, war, and the forging of an empire in shadow, know this: we truly do care for you, our listener, wherever you are in the great expanse of this galaxy. Your presence here is no small thing. So tell us, where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there? Now, pour yourself a coffee and let us begin. It began in silence. Abaddon walked the shattered decks of the Vengeful Spirit, his footsteps echoing in chambers once filled with the roars of the Legion. Broken banners swayed gently in the stale air, their colours dimmed. In the Apothecarian, he passed the shattered stasis pod that had once held the gene seed of their fallen brothers. The symbols of the Sons of Horus were everywhere, mocking him. They were the relics of a dream that had rotted from within, and each one whispered of failure. In the depths of the ship lay the vaults of the Warmaster. Sealed since the siege, they were guarded by the few warriors still loyal enough to refuse entry to any save their first captain. Their armor was rusted, their eyes hollow. When they saw Abaddon approach, they stepped aside without a word. Even in their despair, they recognized that something greater than grief now guided him. The vault door groaned as ancient locks disengaged. The stale air inside smelled of oil and dust, and the faintest trace of the Warmaster's presence. Armor stands loomed like tombstones, empty save for one relic, the talon of Horus. The great weapon was more than a clawed gauntlet. It was the symbol of command, forged in the days before the heresy, worn by Horus through every campaign until the end. To hold it was to hold the authority of the Legion itself. Abaddon stepped forward. His hand hovered above the weapon. In that instant, he felt the weight of 1,000 eyes, the gaze of the gods, the judgment of his brothers, the memory of Horus himself. He thought of the man who had once inspired him to swear eternal loyalty, and of the gods who had whispered lies into their ears. "I will not kneel," Abaddon said aloud, his voice steady, defiant. "Not to the corpse on Terra, and not to you." He took the talon. The vault seemed to shudder, as though the eye itself had felt the choice. The claws flexed in his grasp, powered by ancient mechanisms that still remembered the grip of Horus. The cold of the metal sank into his skin, and with it came a strange calm. This was no longer the gauntlet of Horus Lupercal. It was his. When Abaddon emerged from the vault, the warriors waiting there bowed their heads. They did not speak, but something passed between them. The silent acknowledgement that their legion was dead, but something else had just been born. In that moment, the seed of the Black Legion was planted, and though the galaxy would not feel its shadow for decades, it would one day grow vast enough to smother worlds. Somewhere deep within the Eye of Terror, the gods smiled, and somewhere even deeper, they began to whisper. The Eye of Terror was a shattered mirror of the galaxy itself, fractured, twisted, and endlessly dark. In its depths, the remnants of the traitor legions wandered like ghosts without a home or a cause. These were not the mighty warriors who had once marched beneath the banners of Horus, but fractured war bands, each nursing old grudges and festering wounds. The sons of Horus were no exception. Their name, once a clarion call to rebellion, was now a whisper among scattered warriors who fought more to survive than to conquer. Abaddon moved through this darkness like a storm. His presence was a beacon in the void for those who still remembered the glory they had lost, and a warning to those who doubted his resolve. His black power armor, adorned with the talon-clawed gauntlet he had claimed, seemed to drink in the swirling shadows around him. Every step was measured, every word deliberate. This was a man who had outlived his masters and was ready to remake the galaxy in his own image. Yet, within him churned a tempest. The burdens of leadership pressed down with relentless weight. How does one forge unity from the ashes of betrayal? How does one inspire loyalty in a legion broken not just in body but in spirit? These questions haunted Abaddon, even as he faced his warbands. The first to answer his summons was Ezekiel's oldest ally, Khan the Betrayer. Known for his fury unmatched on the battlefield, Khan was both feared and revered. His crimson-streaked armor marked him as one who had drunk deep from the chalice of madness. Yet beneath the blood-soaked exterior, Khan held a strange loyalty to Abaddon and to the vision of a new order. Their reunion was not warm. Words were few, but the unspoken understanding was clear. The old ways would not serve them. Abaddon needed more than warriors. He needed a new purpose. As the days passed, Abaddon summoned other captains, those who had skirted death in the heresy and fled into the warp's labyrinthine embrace. Some came willingly, hungry for meaning. Others arrived with suspicion, their eyes sharp for weakness. Among these was Lucius the Eternal, a paragon of arrogance and deadly skill. His eternal curse of survival was both a gift and a curse, one that fed his vanity even as it chained him to an existence without end. The tension between these warriors was palpable. Every meeting held the scent of potential betrayal. Alliances were forged in whispered promises but dissolved in the clash of ambition. Abaddon watched closely, aware that to unite such fractured souls, he would have to wield more than strength. He would need cunning and an unbreakable will. In the depths of this gathering, Abaddon wrestled with his own doubts. The gods who once promised dominion had betrayed Horus. Should he now place his trust in them? Or was it time to cast off their chains entirely? These thoughts gnawed at his resolve, a constant internal war threatening to undo the fragile unity he sought to build. One night, beneath the fractured light of a dying star in the eye, Abaddon stood alone on the deck of his flagship. The void stretched endlessly before him, a canvas of darkness, pierced by distant fading lights. The whispering winds of the warp teased his thoughts, offering visions of power and ruin in equal measure. He closed his eyes and saw Horus, not as a corpse on terror, but as the man he had been before corruption twisted his soul. The vision was both balm and poison, a reminder of the path that had been lost and the path that still might be forged anew. Abaddon's voice broke the silence. The galaxy has forgotten what it means to be strong. We will remind it, not as pawns of gods, but as masters of our own fate. His hand clenched the talon of Horus, feeling its cold bite. It was more than a weapon. It was a symbol of the promise he would now make to himself and to those who would follow him. The road ahead was treacherous, littered with enemies without and traitors within. But Abaddon would rise, not as a shadow of the past, but as the harbinger of a new dark age. As dawn crept over the distant horizons of the eye, his warbands gathered, fractured no longer, but bound by purpose. The Black Legion was born. The warp is a cruel master, whispered the ancient Xenos scholars, and none knew this truth better than Ezekiel Abaddon. To survive within its turbulent embrace was to accept bargains no sane soul would dare make. Yet, in the shadows of the Eye of Terror, power was the currency of survival, and Abaddon's warbands needed strength far beyond mere steel and will. The gods watched him from their thrones of swirling chaos, their eyes like coals burning in an eternal night. Khorne, the blood god, thirsted for endless slaughter. Tzeentch, the architect of fate, wove schemes within schemes. Nurgle, the Plague Father, smiled with a grotesque affection, offering pestilence as both curse and boon. And Slaanesh, the Prince of Excess, promised ecstasy and ruin in equal measure. Abaddon knew their gifts came with chains, invisible but binding. Their whispers were poison wrapped in honey, seductive promises that sought to ensnare the soul. Yet, the first captain was no fool. He understood that to lead his legion to true power, he must master the masters, or else be consumed by them. In the darkened sanctums of the vengeful spirit, where arcane symbols glowed faintly in the shadows, Abaddon convened his warlords. The air was thick with incense and whispered prayers, not to any single god, but to the ambition that burned within them all. The gods offer power, Abaddon began, his voice steady and cold as voidstone. But power without purpose is a curse. We will take their gifts, but on our terms. His lieutenants exchanged wary glances. To bargain with the Chaos gods was to invite madness, and madness had claimed many before. Yet none doubted Abaddon's resolve. Through rites forgotten by mortal minds, rituals older than the Imperium itself were performed. Warp energies surged and crackled, bathing the chamber in an otherworldly light. Abaddon stood at the center, a conduit between realms, as the pact was sealed. But even as the power coursed through his veins, a shadow crept along the edges of his mind. A voice, ancient and mocking, echoed in the void between thoughts. "Do you think you are the master now?" it hissed. "You are but a plaything, as was he." The vision of Horus flickered before him, a grim reminder of the fate that awaited those who placed faith in the gods of chaos. Abaddon clenched his fists, the gauntlet of the talon burning with unholy fire. "I am no man's pawn," he declared. "I will wield this power to remake the galaxy, not for the gods, but for myself." Yet beneath the defiance lay a fracture of doubt. Could he truly escape the gods' grasp? Or was he already entwined in a web from which no mortal or immortal could break free? Days turned to weeks as the Black Legion grew stronger, infused with the gifts of their dark patrons. Their weapons sang with warp fire, their armor shimmered with baleful energies. But alongside their might grew the price: hallucinations, madness, and the creeping decay of body and soul. Among the legionaries, whispers spread of Abaddon's vision, of a war not to serve chaos, but to command it. Some called it heresy, others salvation. In quiet moments, when the din of war fell away, Abaddon pondered the road ahead. The long war would not be won by mere strength. It required cunning, sacrifice, and the cold embrace of betrayal. As the stars dimmed once more beyond the hull, he made a silent vow: to bend the gods to his will, or be consumed trying. The ruins of old war zones lay scattered across the eye of terror, relics of battles that had torn the galaxy asunder for centuries. Among these shattered echoes, Abaddon moved with deliberate purpose, a figure carved from shadow and iron. The task before him was nothing less than impossible: to bind the fractured traitor legions under a single banner, to reclaim the might that Horus once wielded, and to forge a new empire from ashes and blood. The Black Legion, as it would come to be called, was more than a name. It was a vision born from desperation and ambition, a dark flame burning against the void. But its birth was a torment wrought from old grudges and bitter betrayals. Abaddon stood before a council of warlords, each one a living legend scarred by centuries of conflict and treachery. Their eyes were hard, their voices laced with venom and suspicion. These were not loyal brothers bound by camaraderie, but broken souls seeking power, and some coveted the throne that Abaddon claimed. "Speak your grievances," Abaddon commanded, his voice low and commanding. "But know this: there is no place for weakness or treachery here. Swear your loyalty to the Black Legion, or die as the sons of Horus have." The room was heavy with silence before a grizzled warrior stepped forward, his armor pitted and stained with the blood of 1,000 battles. "I am Ezekiel Abaddon," the man said, "and I offer you a choice. Unite with me, or be left to rot in the eye's endless darkness." Some swore fealty with bitter smiles. Others spat curses and threatened rebellion. The old rivalries, forged in the fires of the Horus heresy, simmered beneath the surface like a slow-burning poison. Among the dissenters was a once proud captain of the World Eaters, his rage barely contained beneath a veneer of control. He challenged Abaddon openly, mocking his claim to leadership. Their duel was brutal, a tempest of blades and fury that echoed across the council chamber. The fight was not just for honor, but for the soul of the Black Legion itself. When Abaddon's gauntlet crushed the challenger's throat, The assembled warlords knew that his rule was absolute, but the victory tasted bitter. Every blow exchanged was a reminder of the Legion's fractured past. Trust was a fragile thread, and Abaddon bore the burden of weaving it into an unbreakable chain. Beyond the Council, whispers of the Black Legion's rise reached the ears of the Imperium. Star-Lords dismissed the rumors as the ravings of heretics, blind to the storm gathering beyond the veil of real space. This arrogance would cost them dearly. In the quiet that followed, Abaddon retreated to his chamber, the weight of leadership pressing down upon him. He pondered the cost of his ambition, the lives sacrificed, the betrayals endured, and the legacy he sought to build. His reflection stared back from the darkened glass, gaunt and haunted. The dream of a new empire was born from pain, and it would be forged in blood. The stars above flickered uncertainly, as if wary of the darkness to come. The First Black Crusade was not merely a campaign, it was a reckoning. It was a declaration that the shattered remnants of the traitor legions would no longer be pawns or exiles, but harbingers of a new order. An order forged in fire and shadow under Abaddon's unyielding hand. The stars themselves seemed to recoil as the Black Legion's fleets poured from the Eye of Terror, a tidal wave of warships etched in black and adorned with the clawed talon of Horus. Their approach was a silence that thundered, a shadow that swallowed worlds whole. Abaddon stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit, his eyes cold and distant as the void outside. This was more than a battle for territory. It was a war to sever the past and claim a future unshackled from the treacheries of gods and men alike. The campaign began with the siege of a forgotten fortress world, its surface scarred by ancient wars and buried secrets. Abaddon led from the front, his presence a beacon for his warriors and a herald of doom for his enemies. But even amidst the carnage, the wounds of betrayal cut deep. Not all within the Black Legion welcomed the path Abaddon chose. In the shadows, old rivalries festered. A trusted lieutenant, jealous of Abaddon's rising power, conspired to usurp him, weaving webs of deceit among the war bands. The seeds of betrayal took root amid the flames of war. In the depths of the battlefield, Abaddon confronted this traitor. Their clash was brutal and swift, a deadly dance of blades and rage beneath a sky churned by firestorms. When the traitor fell, his dying words were a curse that echoed in Abaddon's mind long after the fight had ended. You will drown in your own ambition. Victory came at a terrible cost. The fortress fell, its defenses shattered, its population extinguished like a candle in the wind. Among the spoils was a relic of terrible power, a demon artifact whispered to be forged in the earliest days of the warp. Abaddon claimed it, sensing its dark energy thrumming beneath his gauntlet. It was a weapon, yes, but also a key, a symbol that the Black Legion's rise was no mere rebellion, but the birth of something far greater and infinitely more dangerous. Yet, as the stars burned bright with the fires of conquest, a shadow lingered in Abaddon's mind, the whispered curse, the weight of the relic, and the knowledge that the gods were watching, waiting for him to falter. The First Black Crusade had begun, but the true war was only just dawning. The pursuit of power is a path lined with shadows. For Abaddon, the quest was not merely to wield weapons forged in flame, but to claim the very essence of chaos itself. Among the whispered legends of the warp was the demon sword, Drachenyan, a blade said to drink the souls of its victims and amplify the will of its bearer beyond mortal limits. To grasp such a weapon was to embrace a destiny entwined with ruin and glory. but it would not be given freely. The journey led Abaddon deep into the bowels of a demon world, a place where reality thinned and madness seeped like a poison. The air was thick with corruption, the skies wept ash, and the ground pulsed with the cries of countless souls trapped between existence and oblivion. Each step toward Drachnion was a trial. The sword was guarded by demon lords and twisted nightmares, each manifestation a reflection of Abaddon's own fears and desires. Battles raged not just in the physical realm, but within the recesses of his mind. Visions assailed him, ghosts of Horus accusing him of betrayal, the faces of fallen brothers pleading for salvation, and the silent gaze of the Chaos Gods watching, waiting to claim his soul. Yet Abaddon pressed forward, driven by a purpose greater than survival, to master the forces that once controlled him and bend them to his will. When he finally reached the blade, it lay embedded in a pedestal of bone and sinew, pulsing with a dark, malevolent energy. The moment his gauntlet touched the hilt, a surge of power exploded through him, searing flesh and spirit alike. Drachnion was more than a weapon. It was a mirror, reflecting the depths of ambition and the abyss of damnation. The sword whispered promises of conquest, of immortality beyond the fragile flesh. But it also showed the cost, a future where Abaddon would become less man and more demon, a herald of endless war and sorrow. For a fleeting moment, doubt flickered within him. Was this the price he was willing to pay? Could he hold on to his humanity while wielding such corruption? Then, with the resolve that had defined his rise, Abaddon grasped the sword fully and pulled it free. The blade sang with unholy fury, and the shadows around him bent to his will. He was no longer just a warrior. He was the harbinger of a dark age. As he emerged from the demon world, the stars themselves seemed to recoil at his passing. The Black Legion had gained a weapon worthy of their ambition, and its wielder was transformed. But the true battle was yet to come. The skies above Imperial space darkened with the arrival of the Black Legion's dread fleets, ships black as voidstone, emblazoned with the clawed talon of Horus, pierced through the stars like a tempest born of nightmares. The Long War had entered a new phase, one defined not by scattered raids or whispered threats, but by open fire and relentless conquest. Abaddon's voice, cold and commanding, carried through the halls of his flagship, the vengeful spirit. We burn the false light from the galaxy. Let the Imperium taste the shadow of its own decay. The Black Legion's forces swept across the border worlds like a plague, crushing defenders and razing worlds to ash. The warriors fought with fury that bordered on madness, driven by a grim purpose that transcended mere hatred. This was no longer the vengeance of fallen traitors. It was a crusade to forge a new order from the broken bones of the old. Yet, even as they brought ruin to the doorstep of the Imperium, a darker battle simmered within their ranks. The warlords of the Black Legion, once united by common loss, now vied for favor and power. Old grievances flared beneath the surface. Rival captains whispered in shadows, plotting to seize command or claim glory that Abaddon sought to keep for himself. Among these was a cunning warlord, whose ambition masked itself with loyalty, a serpent cloaked in the black armor of the Legion. His eyes gleamed with the promise of betrayal, and his words were laced with poison. Abaddon sensed the danger, but the tides of war demanded his attention elsewhere. The siege of a sacred imperial shrine world drew his focus, a place where the faithful clung desperately to hope amid despair. The battle was a crucible. Warp storms raged overhead, and the air trembled with the clash of bolter fire and demon claws. Amid the chaos, Abaddon's strategic mind held the tide, his presence a dark beacon inspiring his legionaries to greater fury. When the shrine fell, its destruction was absolute, not for strategic value, but as a message to the Imperium and its false gods. The Black Legion would not be denied, and their rage was unending. But the victory was marred by whispers of treachery within the Black Legion's own ranks. The serpent moved closer to striking, weaving webs of influence that threatened to unravel the fragile unity Abaddon had forged. As the fires of war consumed the stars, Abaddon stood alone in the command chamber, his gaze distant yet sharp. The external battles were but echoes of the internal struggle, a war for the soul of the Black Legion. The storm was rising, and its fury would soon break. The whispers had grown into a storm. In the darkened corridors of the vengeful spirit, shadows shifted with secrets too dangerous to speak aloud. The serpent, once a trusted warlord, moved like a shadow predator, sowing discord among the Black Legion's captains. His lies were silk-wrapped daggers, each word a strike aimed at the heart of Abaddon's fragile command. Abaddon, though vigilant, had been drawn into the wider war, the clash of fleets, the ruin of worlds, the relentless siege of the Imperium's borders. Yet beneath his calculated gaze, a cold unease gnawed at his resolve. He knew that the greatest threat to his vision was not the Emperor's armies, but the poison within. The traitor's network extended deep. Trusted lieutenants were seduced by promises of power. Old grudges rekindled like dry tinder. The Black Legion, forged from shattered souls, threatened to fracture anew. In a moment of brutal clarity, Abaddon summoned his closest advisors. The warlord's betrayal was no longer a shadow, but a blade poised to strike. The council gathered in the war chamber, the air thick with tension and the scent of blood and oil. The accused warlord entered, defiant yet wary. His words were honeyed, his denials convincing. But Abaddon's gaze was unyielding, a storm ready to break. "You weave treachery among my sons." Abaddon's voice cut like a thunderclap. "Know this, betrayal will be extinguished in fire." The warlord's mask slipped for a heartbeat, revealing the desperation beneath. The council erupted into chaos, voices raised, accusations flung like weapons. Steel sang in the ensuing melee. Loyalists clashed with the traitor's followers, the warship's corridors becoming a battleground of brother against brother. In the heart of the chaos, Abaddon moved with deadly precision. His talon gauntlet crushed bone and will alike. The traitor fell beneath his wrath, his final breath a curse promising the Legion's doom. But victory was hollow. The Black Legion had tasted the bitter poison of internal strife, and the wounds ran deep. Abaddon retreated to his chamber, his mind a storm of doubt and resolve. The war without was relentless, but the war within threatened to consume everything he had built. As the vengeful spirit sailed through the warp, its captain stared into the swirling void, knowing the true battle was far from over. The serpent had been struck down, but the venom lingered. The galaxy's pulse quickened as the Black Legion advanced deeper into Imperial space. Worlds that had long stood as bastions of faith and order now trembled under the shadow of Abaddon's relentless crusade. But with every conquest, the fires of resistance burned brighter. The Imperium, battered and fractured, summoned its greatest champions to stem the tide. Among them rose a figure cloaked in the Emperor's light, a Primarch once lost, now returned with vengeance in his eyes. His name was Robert Guilliman, Lord Commander of the Imperium and architect of its salvation. His arrival was was a beacon of hope for the Loyalists and a dire omen for Abaddon's ambitions. The two leaders, bound by history and fate, would soon clash, not just in the crucible of war, but in the shadowed depths of morality and choice. As the Black Legion laid siege to a key Forge world, Guilliman's forces arrived, turning the battlefield into a storm of fire and steel. The war was no longer a one-sided slaughter, but a deadly dance of strategy and savagery. Abaddon's war bands fought with the fury of despair and the precision of seasoned veterans. Each clash carried the weight of ancient grudges and personal vendettas. But even as battle raged, the cracks within the Black Legion's unity deepened. The scars of past betrayals whispered doubts into the hearts of warriors. Amidst the carnage, Abaddon confronted Guilliman in a brief but brutal encounter. Words were exchanged, not just of threats, but of bitter history and conflicting ideals. Guilliman spoke of duty and redemption. Abaddon spoke of freedom from false gods and broken promises. Their duel ended inconclusively, a harbinger of the long war yet to come. Yet, beyond the battlefield, darker forces stirred. The Chaos Gods watched with growing interest, their schemes weaving through the mortal plane. The whispers of rebellion and the clashing of swords were but the prelude to a greater, more devastating conflict. Abaddon retreated, not defeated, but tempered by the encounter. His resolve hardened. The long war was far from over, and he would need every ounce of cunning and strength to claim victory. The galaxy held its breath. The endless echoes of war carved deep scars into Abaddon's soul. The long war was not just fought across the stars. It raged within the hearts of those who bore its burden. Every victory was tinged with loss, every triumph shadowed by the ghosts of comrades fallen and ideals shattered. In the twilight of his command, Abaddon wandered the hollow halls of the vengeful spirit, a solitary figure amidst the machinery of death and destiny. The faces of his closest allies haunted him. Friends turned foes, brothers betrayed, warriors who had sacrificed their humanity on the altar of ambition. Khan's madness whispered like a distant storm, unpredictable and violent. Lucius's eternal curse was a reminder of survival's bitter cost. Even the demon's sword Drachnian sang with the weight of 1,000 souls, its hunger never sated. Abaddon's mind was a battleground, torn between the desire for ultimate power and the flickering remnants of the man he once was. The gods' gifts came at a price far greater than he had imagined, a price paid in isolation, doubt, and the erosion of trust. The Black Legion, though formidable, was fractured beneath the surface. Loyalties shifted like shadows in the warp, and the spectre of betrayal lurked in every whispered counsel. In a rare moment of vulnerability, Abaddon confided in an ancient relic, a fragment of the Silent King's wisdom preserved in Xenos text. The words spoke of eternity's curse, of the burden borne by those who outlive empires and watch stars die. Immortality is a prison, the text warned, and those who escape death often lose the very essence of their soul. The irony was not lost on Abaddon. To defy mortality was to embrace endless conflict, yet to surrender was to fade into oblivion. As the vengeful spirit pierced through the void, Abaddon steeled himself for the trials yet to come. The galaxy's fate hung in balance, and the choices ahead would shape not just empires, but the very nature of existence. The burden of command was heavy, but it was his to bear alone. The Black Legion sailed deeper into the fractured heart of the galaxy, a tidal wave of shadow and death. But beneath their ruthless advance, the fractures within the Legion widened, threatening to rend apart the fragile unity forged in fire and blood. Abaddon stood upon the bridge of the vengeful spirit, watching distant stars flicker like dying embers. His gaze was sharp but weary, burdened by the knowledge that the greatest threats were not the armies arrayed against him, but the doubts and betrayals festering within his own ranks. The warlords whispered behind closed doors, their loyalties as shifting as the warp storms that buffeted the fleet. Some sought power through manipulation, others through outright rebellion. The serpent's legacy of poison lingered like a curse, infecting minds with paranoia and suspicion. One by one, trusted captains vanished, either in battle or under more mysterious circumstances. The air was thick with suspicion. Who could be trusted? Who would strike next? In the shadows, Abaddon wrestled with his own demons. The price of immortality weighed heavily upon him. To lead was to sacrifice not only others but himself, piece by piece, to the endless hunger of war. Yet he refused to yield. His vision of a new dark empire burned brighter than ever, even as those closest to him teetered on the edge of rebellion. In a private chamber, Abaddon met with his most loyal lieutenant, a warrior whose faith in the captain's cause remained unbroken. Their conversation was heavy with unspoken fears. "The Legion fractures beneath us," the lieutenant warned. "We must act before the rot consumes us." Abaddon nodded, knowing the bitter truth. To survive, he must be both warlord and executioner. Trust would be met with iron, betrayal with fire. The storm within the Black Legion raged as fiercely as the wars without. Every decision was a gamble, every alliance a fragile thread. As the vengeful spirit sailed on, its captain prepared for the reckoning, a trial that would test the limits of loyalty, sacrifice, and the will to endure. The fate of the Black Legion and the galaxy hung in the balance. The blackened skies of the Eye of Terror churned with storms both celestial and mortal. The Black Legion stood at the precipice of its destiny, the weight of countless betrayals and battles pressing down like the cold hand of death itself. Abaddon's vision of dominion had brought them here, on the edge of an empire teetering between chaos and order, salvation and damnation. But the fractures within his own ranks were no longer whispers, they were screams. The traitor who had once cloaked himself in loyalty now revealed his true face, striking a blow that shattered trust and spilled blood in the deepest shadows of the Legion's heart. The battlefield was no longer just the stars. It was the minds and souls of the warriors who followed Abaddon, brothers torn by ambition, fear, and desperation. Amid the carnage, Abaddon faced the ultimate test. His closest allies betrayed him, swayed by promises whispered in the dark by the chaos gods themselves. The line between friend and foe blurred until only survival remained certain. The clash was brutal, not only of weapons, but of ideals. Abaddon's fury was a tempest, but even storms could be broken by a persistent wind. His warband fractured, fighting not just external enemies, but the chaos within. Yet, from this crucible of fire and treachery, something unexpected arose, a fleeting moment of clarity. Abaddon saw the cost of his ambition laid bare, the faces of the fallen, the sacrifices demanded, and the fragile thread upon which the future hung. In the silence that followed the storm, he made a choice, not of vengeance, but of survival, of forging a path forward from the shattered remnants of trust and betrayal. The Black Legion, scarred but unbroken, rallied once more. Their destiny was uncertain, their enemies many. But Abaddon, the Despoiler, stood resolute. The final chapters of this dark saga were yet to be written. The great void outside seemed to close in as Abaddon stood upon the bridge of the vengeful spirit. the weight of countless wars etched into the lines of his face. The Black Legion was no longer just a force of destruction. It was a testament to his will, his sacrifices, and his relentless pursuit of a destiny that defied gods and men alike. Yet, the galaxy's fate was never so simple. Loyalties were tested, and the thin line between salvation and damnation blurred beneath the crimson glare of battle. In the heart of the Black Legion, a final reckoning was underway. Allies turned enemies stood face to face, their swords and bolters raised not only against the Imperium, but against one another. The cost of betrayal had reached its peak, and the choices Abaddon made now would echo through eternity. Amidst the chaos, a voice rose, a desperate plea from one who once was brother. A lieutenant, broken by doubt and regret, begged for mercy, offering a truth that could unravel the entire war. Abaddon's eyes, cold and unyielding, held the weight of millennia. Mercy was a luxury long forsaken. The blade of Draconian sang its deadly hymn as it descended, ending the question before it began. But in that moment of finality, the true enemy revealed itself. The Chaos Gods, ever watchful, had played their hand, turning friend against friend, dream against nightmare. The battle that followed was cataclysmic, a storm of fire and fury that tore through the ranks of the Black Legion and the Imperium alike. Stars burned, worlds crumbled, and destinies collided in a symphony of ruin. Abaddon, wounded but unbroken, stood amidst the ruin, his vision both clearer and more haunted than ever. The cost of his ambition was written in the blood spilled and the souls lost. Yet still, he pressed onward, knowing the final choice was yet to come, a choice that would determine not only his fate, but the fate of all who followed him. The shadow of the Despoiler loomed large, a harbinger of the end and the beginning. The war-ravaged skies above the shattered remnants of the galaxy bore witness to a reckoning unlike any before. The Black Legion, battered yet unyielding, stood on the edge of oblivion, their destiny entwined with the fate of stars themselves. Abaddon's relentless crusade had brought them here, to the final battlefield where empires would fall and legends be forged in blood. The once unified warband was now a fractured echo of its former might, torn apart by betrayals and the ceaseless hunger of the Chaos Gods. Every ally was a potential traitor, every victory shadowed by the price paid in blood and shattered trust. Amidst the ruin, Abaddon faced his most harrowing trial. His closest lieutenants, driven by desperation or dark promises, turned against him in a deadly gamble. The corridors of the vengeful spirit became a maze of betrayal, where every shadow threatened death. Steel clashed with steel, and the air was thick with the screams of the fallen. Abaddon fought with the fury of a god scorned, wielding Draconian like an extension of his own wrath. Each strike was a testament to his resolve and his torment. Yet, even as he crushed traitors beneath his boot, a darker truth gnawed at him. The path he had chosen was a descent into madness, a spiral from which there was no return. The Chaos Gods watched with cruel amusement, their plans unfolding as expected. Abaddon's ambition had made him both their pawn and their equal, a paradox of power and despair. In a fleeting moment of clarity amid the carnage and chaos, Abaddon saw beyond the war, beyond the stars and empires, to the cost of his endless pursuit. Sacrifice was the price of immortality, and he had paid in full. The final battle ended not with triumph, but with silence. The Black Legion stood bloodied, scarred, and forever changed. Abaddon, the Despoiler, remained, an eternal sentinel of war and ruin. The age of heroes was over, the age of shadows had begun. The stars above flickered faintly, like dying embers in a vast cold hearth. The galaxy, scarred and weary, held its breath in the shadow of an empire's twilight. The vengeful spirit drifted silently through the void, its once proud banners tattered, its decks stained with the blood of centuries. Abaddon stood alone on the command bridge, his gauntlet resting on the hilt of Drachnion. The demon blade hummed with a dark eternal hunger, a reminder of the price he had paid, and the fate that awaited all who walked the path of immortality. His eyes, weary but unyielding, gazed into the abyss of endless space. The victories and betrayals, the brothers lost and empires shattered, all weighed heavy upon his soul. Immortality was a curse disguised as a blessing, a slow decay of the spirit amidst the endless war. He was no longer the man who had once dreamed of vengeance or dominion. He was something else, a sentinel bound by fate, an eternal warrior condemned to witness the rise and fall of stars and kings alike. The cost had been immeasurable. Friends turned foes, loyalties broken, and the shadow of the Chaos Gods ever looming. Yet Abaddon endured, a testament to unyielding will and the relentless march of time. As the vengeful spirit sailed onward, the galaxy's fate remained uncertain, caught between light and shadow, hope and despair. Abaddon's story was but one thread in the endless tapestry of war, a saga of ambition, sacrifice, and the tragic cost of immortality. The empire he sought to build would rise or fall in the ages to come. But for now, all that remained was the silence of the void and the unending vigil of the Despoiler. The age had ended, and with it, the last light of hope flickered into darkness.